Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. Today, we are diving into some news that I'm sure a lot of you shoppers out there might have seen popping up in headlines
Right.
recently. We're talking about Kohl's and some of their stores that are closing. We've got a couple great articles here that we're going to be pulling from one from USA Today that lists a whole bunch of these closures across 15 states.
Mm.
And then another one from Penn Live that focuses on a specific closure in Pennsylvania, but gives us some really interesting kind of broader context about the retail world as a whole.
Hmm.
So our mission in this deep dive, I guess you could say, is to really break down the most important info from these reports. We want to figure out, just how big of a deal these closures are,
Yeah.
what it all means for the future of retail, and of course, without throwing too much information at you.
Yeah. Right. We don't want to bog anyone down with too many details, but at the same time, it is important, like you said, to look beyond just, what's happening and really try to understand the why behind these closures. And how that connects to those bigger trends that are shaping how we all shop, what the future of retail might actually look like.
Totally. So let's just jump right into it.
Yeah.
The big news that's making the rounds is that Kohl's is closing 27 of their stores, and that's across 15 different states, and this is happening this Saturday, March 29th.
Wow.
It's a pretty big number of locations all shutting down on the same day,
Mm.
which, makes you stop and think what's going on that's making them make such a widespread move like this.
Yeah, it does. And it's interesting to remember, even though these closures are happening right now, the initial announcement actually came out earlier in the year.
Right.
So this isn't, some kind of like sudden, oh my gosh, reaction to something. It seems more like a planned strategic thing that Kohl's has been working on as part of some kind of like, I guess, shift for the company.
That's a great point. So to give everyone listening a better sense of, just how many stores we're talking about, let's actually go through some of the specific locations because it really hits home when you hear about actual stores closing in different parts of the country.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so we've got one closing in Spanish Fort, Alabama. There's another one in Little Rock, West Arkansas. California's got a few on the list, including one on Balboa in San Diego.
Oh, wow.
Over in Colorado, the Arapahoe Crossing location in Aurora is shutting down. And then moving east, we've got Duluth, Georgia, Boise, Idaho, also on the list.
Mm-hmm.
Illinois has a closure in Plainfield, Massachusetts, and Stoughton.
Okay.
East Winds in New Jersey,
Mm.
Blue Ash, Ohio. The Portland Gateway store in Oregon also affected.
Right.
And then, of course, Pennsylvania, which we get a bit of a closer look at thanks to that Penn Live article. They're losing their Pottstown location.
Right.
And the list keeps going north, Dallas, Texas, Riverton, Utah, and both Herndon and Williamsburg in Virginia.
Wow.
It's a lot of different places all over the map.
It really is. And, hearing you list all those locations really drives home the point that this isn't just like a, regional thing happening in one specific part of the country. It seems more like Kohl's is reevaluating all their stores across the entire U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And like you mentioned, that article from Penn Live really focuses in on that Pottstown, Pennsylvania store and confirms that, yeah, this Saturday is the last day they're going to be open.
Right.
So you can just imagine, what kind of impact that has on the people who shop there, the employees, everyone in that community.
Absolutely. So the big question, obviously, is why are these stores closing? What's the reason behind all of this?
Yeah.
And both of the articles we looked at point to the same thing. These are what they call underperforming locations.
Right.
But that term underperforming, I mean, it feels kind of vague.
Mm.
What exactly does that mean? And they keep saying it's all part of this bigger transformation strategy for Kohl's.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think is actually behind this underperformance? I mean, is it just about sales numbers or is there something else going on?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, while sales figures are definitely like the main way to measure how well a store is doing, I think underperforming could actually mean a bunch of different things. Maybe those stores just aren't getting enough foot traffic compared to other locations. Maybe their operating costs are way too high. Or it could even be that these stores just don't fit in with, the kind of customer Kohl's is trying to attract.
Oh, that's interesting.
Or the overall image they want for their brand. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the fact that Kohl's is using this word transformation makes me think that they're not just making small changes, they're trying to change their whole business in a big way, like a
Right.
complete realignment.
Yeah, and these changes they're making, they seem to go way beyond just closing these 27 stores. I mean, the USA Today article mentioned some pretty big stuff happening up at the corporate level, like changes to people in charge, a 10% reduction in their corporate workforce,
Mm.
and they're even changing how they deal with Amazon returns in some of the stores that are staying open.
Wow.
It's a lot to take in.
It really is. It's like everything's happening at once.
Yeah.
But you know what's really interesting to me is how all of these changes are connected.
Oh, how so?
Well, think about it. That workforce reduction, that could be Kohl's trying to, become more efficient and cut down on costs because they're feeling some financial pressure.
Makes sense.
And the Amazon returns thing, remember, that was a huge selling point for Kohl's for a while.
Oh, yeah.
But now they're changing how that works, so maybe they're realizing that it's not as beneficial as they thought. Maybe all those extra people coming in to return Amazon stuff wasn't actually leading to more sales for Kohl's, or maybe it was just a big hassle for them to manage all those returns.
Right, right.
It makes you wonder if customer behavior around returns has changed too. Like maybe people aren't returning as much stuff as they used to.
Yeah. It's definitely something to think about. And there's another big change that article mentions. They're closing their e-commerce fulfillment center in San Bernardino, California in May. And that's a facility that's been operating for over 10 years. That feels like a pretty major shift in how they're approaching online sales.
Absolutely. Closing a fulfillment center that's been around that long means they're probably completely rethinking their whole online logistics setup. Maybe they're consolidating everything into fewer locations or investing in some fancy new technology to make things more efficient. Or who knows, maybe they're even trying out completely different delivery strategies because online shopping is constantly changing.
Right.
The point is, all these changes are connected. They're not just random things Kohl's is doing.
Yeah.
It paints a picture of a company trying to adjust to a whole bunch of different challenges all at the same time.
That's a really good point. And, if we connect all of this back to how Kohl's has been doing financially, which both articles talk about, things become a little clearer. Remember, they had that 9.4% drop in sales in the last quarter of 2024, and then a 7.2% decline for the entire year.
Yeah.
And then looking ahead, they're expecting sales to drop even further by 2% in 2025.
Yikes.
So when you look at those numbers, it's not that surprising that they're making some big changes, trying to cut costs and rethink their whole approach to business,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you see sales declining like that for a while, companies have to start making some tough choices to, get their finances back on track and set themselves up for future growth, whatever that might look like in today's crazy retail world.
Right.
And sometimes that means closing stores that aren't doing well because it's a pretty straightforward way to cut down on expenses and focus your energy and resources on areas that have more potential.
Now, even though 27 stores closing sounds like a lot, the USA Today article makes sure to remind us that Kohl's is still going to have over 1,120 stores open all across the country.
Right.
So it's not like they're disappearing overnight.
Exactly. And that's important to remember. It helps us see that this isn't like Kohl's giving up on having physical stores altogether. They're still going to have a huge presence in malls and shopping centers all over the place, which makes me think they still believe in the value of brick and mortar retail, just maybe a more streamlined and strategic version of it.
Makes sense. And of course, we can't forget about the people who work at those 27 stores that are closing, what's going to happen to them. And that Penn Live article gives us a little insight into that. They say that all the employees of those stores have been told about the closures and that Kohl's is offering them severance packages and the chance to apply for open jobs at other Kohl's locations.
Yeah, that's pretty standard practice when something like this happens. And while it definitely doesn't make up for the stress and uncertainty those employees must be feeling, it's good that Kohl's is trying to do right by them.
Definitely.
Offering things like severance pay and helping them find new jobs within the company can make a big difference when people are losing their jobs.
Absolutely. And that Penn Live article, it brings up something really interesting. They talk about this idea of a retail apocalypse and how Kohl's isn't the only one facing these challenges and having to close stores. They specifically mention Macy's as another example.
Yeah.
So when you look at it in this broader context, it feels like what's happening with Kohl's is just one piece of a much bigger shift that's happening across the entire retail industry.
I think you're right. I mean, the retail landscape has been changing so much in recent years. Online shopping has exploded. Consumer habits are totally different. And now there's all this competition from online retailers and those big discount stores. So traditional department stores like Kohl's and Macy's, they're really having to figure out how to survive in this new world. And closing stores is often a sign of just how much pressure they're under.
It makes you wonder what department stores are even going to look like in the future.
Right. What's their place in all of this?
All right, so let's sum up what we've learned in this deep dive. We know that Kohl's is closing 27 stores in 15 states, and this is all happening this Saturday, March 29th. It's part of their plan to restructure their whole business, which includes changes at their corporate offices and some changes to how they handle online sales, too.
Right.
The main reason behind all this seems to be that those specific stores that are closing just weren't doing as well as other locations. And all of this is happening while Kohl's is dealing with lower sales overall. But even with these closures, they're still going to have a ton of stores open all across the country. And they're doing what they can to help the employees who are losing their jobs.
Yeah.
And this whole situation, it really highlights the bigger changes that are happening in the retail industry as a whole. It's not just about Kohl's.
Yeah, exactly. These closures are like a little glimpse into how the retail world is evolving. It shows how important it is for businesses to adapt to changing customer behavior and the realities of the economy.
And that brings us to something I want you all to think about. After hearing about these Kohl's closures and all the trends we've been talking about, what do you think are the most important things that determine whether a physical store succeeds or fails these days? What have you noticed about stores in your own community? Are they doing well? Are they struggling?
Hmm.
What do you think all these changes mean for the future of how we shop? Are we all just going to be buying everything online, or will physical stores always have a place?
It's a really interesting question, and one that I think is going to keep evolving for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.